Well, good morning, everybody. All right, so I'm not going to say I'm excited about this, and we'll see how this thing works on my ear. If not, I'll just take it off. Uh, there you go. Donald's excited, and so I'm excited for you. So yeah, about a week or so ago, Pastor Chris walked into my office and he goes, "Hey, man, I have this opportunity to go see Blake, and so we're taking it." I was like, "I completely understand that." And he goes, "Pastor Philip's going to be gone as well. Pastor Stephen just doesn't want to do it. So that leaves you." Pastor Stephen did have all the children's stuff, so I understand. And so he's like, "That leaves you." I was like, "Man, I got this. I got this." And he walked out of the office, and I went, "Oh, my goodness, what have I got myself into?" So this morning, we're going to be looking at part 5 of our Investing in Hillcrest series. But before we get into it, I want to tell you guys a story, just a little bit about me and my history. When I was in seminary a long, long time ago, I went to Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary, which is in Wake Forest, North Carolina, which is right outside of Raleigh. And so Michelle and I just got married, and so I'm in seminary, and I need a job. And so there was a church in Raleigh that offered me a job there. And so I became their part-time minister of music. All right? Now, when you're in seminary, like, finding a job is awesome. So I'm their part-time minister of music. And so I start there. They have one service. It's blended. Now, this was 20 years ago. And so it's blended, and by blended, I mean it was like very, very heavy traditional, and then they would sing like one little chorus of like "As the Deer," for those of y'all who remember stuff like that. And so fine, that was great. I got hired, came in, did my job. But the only problem was the church wasn't growing. And so they thought, well, let's do something different with the music. I have certain skills and things that I know. And so they said, let's take advantage of that. And so the church voted to go to 2 services. And so they were going to have an 11 o'clock traditional service and an 8:30 in the morning contemporary service. And so 2 services. Are like, okay, that's fine. We can do that. And so the church voted on this, and it's unanimous. Now, the church averaged about 230 people or so. And so it wasn't a big church, but about 230 people or so. So we go to 2 services. Now, we already had a choir, but that meant I had to develop a praise team and a praise band. Had to work on scheduling everybody, doing all that kind of stuff. So we get this thing up and running, and everything's going great. And so we've got this early service going, and we've got about 100 people coming to that, and then we've got Sunday school, and then we've got the second service, the traditional service, and it has about 125, 130 people coming to that. And so everything's going well. When we went to 2 services, because I was doing twice the work, I went full-time. So now I'm a seminary student who has a full-time church job. So I'm like, sweet, this is awesome. I am living the life. And so things are going well. We did a passion play. I talked them into doing a passion play and tearing down walls and crazy stuff. I don't know what they were thinking. Having this 26-year-old come in and say, hey, let's tear down walls in the church. But they let me do all that. So we do this big, massive passion play. We have 1,000 people come through on this weekend or these 2 weekends. And we do all of this awesome stuff. Now, along with this, they said, we would like to have everybody back together at least once a quarter on 5th Sundays. So when we had a 5th Sunday, on that Sunday night, we would have a big joint service. And during the joint service, it was my job to put both services back together into one. And so the choir would sing, the praise team would sing, the praise band would sing, the kids choir would sing, we had youth who would sing, there'd be special music. I had a handbells choir. We did it all. And here's the thing, they loved it. They absolutely loved it. They loved the passion play, they loved the first service, they loved the joint services, they loved the traditional service, they loved everything, and I was everybody's hero. I literally was, for 6 to 8 months, I was everybody's hero. Now, I'm assuming not many of you have led music in a Baptist church. The music minister is never the hero, ever, because it is my job to upset everybody at least every once in a while. When you come in on Sunday, you'll be like, I don't like any of those songs. I'm very sorry. But then somebody else said, I loved all those songs. You'd be like, that's awesome. And then the next week, the same crowd that said, I loved all the songs, they didn't like any of them, but the other crowd's like, man, I loved all the songs. I can't make anybody happy ever. So I was thrilled. I was the guy. I was the man, and I was living it up because it was awesome. Here's the only problem. The church still wasn't growing. None of that mattered. Music styles don't change the church. They just don't. And so the church voted to go back to 1 service. Only this time, it was going to be that blended 5th Sunday night service that we had that everybody loved so much. And so we were like, okay, that's what we'll do. we'll go back to one service. The church voted on it, and if I remember correctly, it was like unanimous or close to unanimous. Like it was like everybody was in on this. And so we go back to one service. What we didn't know was that there was this small little group of people in the church who hated that idea. Hated it. Now, they didn't have enough people to outvote us and to outvote the group who wanted to go back to one service. So they came up with a different strategy. Their strategy was just to make everyone miserable. You ever been to church like that? And so here's what they would do. When you or your family would walk in on a Sunday morning, one of their little group would immediately go to you and grab you and like take you over into a corner and start saying how bad the church was, how much we needed to go back to 2 services, couldn't stand the music, couldn't stand the preaching, couldn't stand any of it. And so slowly but surely, they started pulling people over to their side. And so that little group started getting larger and larger. And the people that they couldn't went over to their side, just got tired of it and left. Because when you go to church, you don't want to go to church and fight. You don't want to go to church and argue. You don't want to go to church and know all the politics and get in all that stuff. And so we just had like this mass exodus of people that just left. And so me and the senior pastor and the youth pastor, we're trying to figure out what in the world to do. But then like it just kept getting worse as the weeks went by. Now, it's in North Carolina, so it's hilly. I know y'all don't have those here, but it was hilly there. So the church was almost like a split level, and so when you first walked in, the sanctuary was on your right, the main offices were straight ahead, and then you could go downstairs, and there was a fellowship hall and a kitchen and classrooms and other stuff down there. My office was not with the rest of the offices. My office was at the top of those stairs. And so what would happen, and people were in and out, going up and down the stairs all the time. They're having meetings, they're fixing meals, like all week long. It's just nonstop. And so what would happen is that some of these people who did not like what we were doing, every time they walked by my office and I'm sitting there working on something, they would just stick their head in and say, "Hey, Brad." I'd be like, "Yes, sir, yes, ma'am." And they would just say the meanest, ugliest things to me. It was horrible. Just absolutely horrible. They talked about me. They talked about my job. They talked about the senior pastor. They talked about the youth pastor. They talked about the church. They talked about my family. They talked about anything and everything. And they would literally just spit this venom at me. And when they were done, they would smile at me and they just walk downstairs. And so, for the first time in my professional career, I had served at a couple of churches part-time and interim, just and other stuff, just kind of getting my foot in the door. But for the first time in my professional career, I was truly facing opposition. And I did not know what to do. And these weren't people that just like disagreed with me or disagreed with the senior pastor, or they disagreed with like just bits and pieces of the church. Like they were out for destruction. That was their goal. I was 29 years old, and I didn't know what to do. I had never faced opposition like that before. So here's what we want to do. We're going to look at Nehemiah chapter 4, all right? And we're going to look at how Nehemiah handled opposition once they started building the wall. And then at the end, we're going to come back to my story and finish up. Everybody good with that? Here we go. Nehemiah chapter 4. We're going to read the entire chapter. All right? You listen quickly, I'll speak quickly, and we'll get through all these verses. All right? I read out of the New Living Translation. I think Pastor Chris uses the ESV. I used to work at a Lifeway Christian bookstore, and so I had to know all about the Bible translations. And listen, whatever translation you want to read, have at it. That is awesome. So if you read the King James, just know that is at the 12th grade reading level, which is too much for me. All right? I think the NASB was at the 10th. The New King James was at the 11th. The ESV, I believe, is at the 9th. The NIV, like the original NIV before they changed it 50 times, was at the 7th. The New Living Translation is at the 5th. 5th grade reading level. So parents, if you need a Bible that your kids can read a little bit better, go with that. It's on the 5th grade reading level. Or for somebody like me, it works out well, because then I understand it. When they come out with one on the 3rd grade reading level, I will then obtain that one. All right, here we go. So Nehemiah chapter 4, we're going to read the entire chapter. All right,
Sanballat was very angry when he learned that we were rebuilding the wall. He flew into a rage and mocked the Jews, saying in front of his friends and the Samaritan army officers, "What does this bunch of poor, feeble Jews think they're doing? Do they think they can build the wall in a single day by just offering a few sacrifices? Do they actually think they can make something of stones from a rubbish heap, and charred ones at that?" Tobiah the Ammonite, who was standing beside him, remarked, "That stone wall would collapse if even a fox walked along the top of it." Then I prayed, "Hear us, O God, for we are being mocked. May their scoffing fall back on their own heads, and may they themselves become captives in a foreign land. Do not ignore their guilt. Do not blot out their sins, for they have provoked you to anger here in front of the builders." At last the wall was completed to half its height around the entire city, for the people had worked with enthusiasm. But when Sanballat and Tobiah and the Arabs, Ammonites and Ashdodites heard that the work was going ahead and that the gaps in the wall of Jerusalem were being repaired, they were furious. They all made plans to come and fight against Jerusalem and throw us into confusion. But we prayed to our God and guarded the city day and night to protect ourselves. Then the people of Judah began to complain. "The workers are getting tired and there's so much rubble to be moved. We will never be able to build the wall by ourselves." Meanwhile, our enemies were saying, "Before they know what's happening, we will swoop down on them and kill them and end their work." The Jews who lived near the enemy came and told us again and again, "They will come from all directions and attack us." So I placed armed guards behind the lowest parts of the wall in the exposed areas. I stationed the people to stand guard by families armed with swords, spears, and bows. Then as I looked over the situation, I called together the nobles and the rest of the people and said to them, "Don't be afraid of the enemy. Remember the Lord who is great and glorious, and fight for your brothers, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your homes." When our enemies heard that we knew of their plans and that God had frustrated them, we all returned to our work on the wall. But from then on, only half my men worked, while the other half stood guard with spears, shields, bows, and coats of mail. The leaders stationed themselves behind the people of Judah who were building the wall. The laborers carried on their work with one hand supporting their load and one hand holding a weapon. All the builders had a sword belted to their side. The trumpeter stayed with me to sound the alarm. Then I explained to the nobles and officials and all the people, "The work is very spread out, and we are widely separated from each other along the wall. When you hear the blast of the trumpet, rush to wherever it is sounding, then our God will fight for us." We worked early and late, from sunrise to sunset, and half the men were always on guard. I also told everyone living outside the walls to stay in Jerusalem. That way they and their servants could help with guard duty at night and work during the day. During this time, none of us, not I, nor my relatives, nor my servants, nor the guards who were with me, ever took off our clothes. We carried our weapons with us at all times, even when we went for water. All right, so that's chapter 4 of Nehemiah. They've started rebuilding the wall, and they're finally facing opposition. All right, now this morning, I have 3 points that I want you to remember, okay? And here's what I'm calling them. 3 truths every wall builder needs to know. Got it? Here's the only problem with that. Studies show that by Tuesday, you will have forgotten between 90 and 95% of what I say. That's just the way that works. All right? So here's what I like to do every once in a while, and the few times that I speak a year. I like to have some visual aids just to remind you of what I'm talking about. Okay? So, 3 truths every wall builder needs to know. Here's number 1. Pair of glasses. So, we look through glasses. They help us to see things. Here's our point. When you're building walls, you don't have to look for trouble. It will find you. All right? Nehemiah and the people of Jerusalem had started rebuilding the walls, and things seemed to be going really well. But then, here comes the opposition. All right? And it came from 2 places. It came from outside the city walls, what was left, and it came from inside the city walls. So let's start with the opposition that was coming from the outside. In verse 1, it says that Sanballat began mocking the people, saying, "Do they think they can rebuild these walls in one day just because they offer some sacrifices? Do they think they can build something out of this rubbish? These stones are broken and burned." I can almost hear him saying, "Good luck with that, guys." Then in verse 3, it says that Tobiah the Ammonite said that the wall would fall down if even a fox walked on it. So apparently he didn't think a whole lot of their workmanship, what was going on. So Sanballat and Tobiah, what are we doing here? Tobiah, yeah. So they started mocking him. That's what the enemy does. All right? Mockery and disbelief are powerful weapons of the enemy because they are the opposite of faith. They are the opposite of faith. When you're serving the Lord, when you're working for Him out of faith, which is what we do, you're going to be mocked by non-believers because they don't see what God is doing. They don't see what God has called you to do. They don't see what He sees. They don't even see what you're seeing. And so they mock what they don't understand. Then on top of that, a lot of times they'll mock what they don't like. Because not everyone is going to like the walls that you build. When you're working for the Lord, not everybody's going to like what you're doing. All right? So, when the mocking didn't work, these guys decided to take it to a whole new level. And so in verses 8 through 11, it says that they made plans to attack and kill the people working on the wall. Now, I don't know about you, but like that's a pretty big jump. Like from making fun of somebody to go all the way to, okay, we're just going to have to go ahead and kill these people. Here's the thing to remember there. Never underestimate the lengths that evil will go to in an effort to stop the work of the Lord. Never underestimate the lengths that evil will go to in an effort to stop the work of the Lord. As I was thinking about that, and I was just thinking about people in the Bible, and I was thinking about the disciples. Now, obviously, Jesus is killed. Satan and his minions think they win, and then 3 days later, the stone rolls away. Jesus comes back to life. Like, they know they're defeated. Like, they know they're defeated, but they still don't stop. Jesus ascends into heaven. The disciples are sent out. We get the Great Commission. And I don't know how many of you know this, but they replaced Judas, the one who betrayed Jesus with Matthias. And so that gave them 12 disciples. And so they go out into the world. All right, how many died of natural causes? One. All right, let's see here. 5 were crucified. 2 were stoned to death. 1 was killed with an axe. 1 was killed with a spear. 1 was beheaded. 1 was this said executed. No method was given there. The Apostle John was the only one who died of old age, and they tried to boil him alive, but miraculously, it didn't work. It didn't work. The Apostle Paul was beheaded. Stephen was stoned to death. Never underestimate the lengths that evil will go to stop the work of the Lord. Because when you're serving the Lord, you should always expect opposition. So that was the opposition from outside. It came from Sanballat and Tobiah and that whole group out there. But it also started coming from within. So in verse 10, it says that the people started complaining that they were tired and that they weren't able to finish the job. When opposition comes, it's easy to be discouraged and to lose hope. And this happens all the time in organizations, on teams, in businesses, and especially in churches. Because as soon as one thing goes wrong, everyone starts complaining. Everybody starts complaining. Complainers are like car alarms. When one goes off, they all go off. And it just never stops. So here we are. Nehemiah and the people are trying to rebuild the wall. They're being mocked. They're being threatened. Opposition has now arisen. And so what are they going to do? All right, this is going to take us to point 2. The first was 3 truths every wall builder needs to know. Number 1, you don't have to look for trouble. Don't have to look for trouble because it'll find you. Number 2, the best defense is a good offense. The best defense is a good offense. So when trouble came, Nehemiah went on the offensive. He didn't wait around until the situation got worse, until the problems got worse. Now, in sports, there are different adages, there are different philosophies on how to build a team. Some people would say that defense wins championships. And then other people would say you can have the best defense in the world, you still have to score more points than the other team to win. Ideally, you wouldn't have to play defense at all. You would just stay out on the offensive all the time. All right, I have 3 kids. For those of you who don't know, I have 3 kids. My oldest now is 18. He graduates here in a month or so. He's in the back standing up, lifting his hands, looks like baby Jesus. So when he was 7, 8 years old, now he loves sports and he loves video games. So when he was 7 or 8 years old, for Christmas, he got a football video game, and it was called Backyard Football. I think we have a picture of it. Backyard football. And so here's what it was. They took all of the NFL teams, and they turned them into little kids, and then you got to play, and on the screen, it looked like it was in somebody's backyard. And so you're playing with these little kid versions of Tom Brady. and Peyton Manning and all these guys. And so he loved playing it. And I enjoy playing video games, and I enjoy sports and stuff. And so we would play this video game. Now, at the time, he's like 7 or 8. And at the time, I'm like in my late 30s. And so I just wore him out on this video game. You know what I mean? I just destroyed him every time. But then one day he goes, "Hey, Dad, let's play the backyard football." I was like, "Okay, that sounds great." What I didn't realize, he had found a glitch in the game. He's laughing about it now because he knows what I'm talking about. He had found a glitch in the game, so I kick off, he gets the ball first, he goes down and scores. He figured out the exact perfect spot to onside kick, if you know anything about football, to where I couldn't get the ball back. And so he'd kick it, he'd recover it, he'd go down and score again. He'd kick it, he'd recover it, he'd go down and score again. So the entire game, he's belly laughing on the floor because I can't ever get the ball. And I'm just getting furious. I'm like, "Jackson!" I'm just getting mad. And the whole time he's just laughing louder and louder and louder and louder. So he had figured out a way to not play defense. And so he was always on offense. Now what you're thinking, okay, well that's just a video game. That couldn't work in real life. Oh, but it does. There's a high school football coach in Arkansas. His name is, let me find it here, Kevin Kelly. He just won his 9th state championship, high school football, Arkansas. And here's his strategy. He never punts. He always onside kicks. 9th state championship. He never punts. He always onside kicks. And if you know anything about football, what that means is that he never wants the other team to have the ball. Because if they don't have the ball, they can't score. And so that's his strategy. And he's won 9 state championships because he never wants his team to be on defense, and his team always has the ball, and they're always looking to score. And so that's what Nehemiah does. He goes on the offensive. When he finds out there's opposition to building the wall, he goes on the offensive in 5 different ways. I'm going to review these quickly, all right? Stay. All right, 5 ways. Now, these work for individuals, they work for businesses, they work for organizations, but they especially work for a church. They especially work for a church. All right, number 1, be prayerful. In verses 4 and 5, it says that as soon as Nehemiah found out about his people being mocked, he prayed and asked God for protection. When trouble and opposition come into your life, what's the first thing you do? Good for you, because I don't. I'm really bad about it. My first thought is I get defensive. I start arguing. I start coming up with a plan for how to fix this or to attack it or to do whatever. And so many times in life, the last thing that I do is pray. When in reality, that needs to be the first thing that we do. And if we pray, then God will lead us through all of the other things that need to happen. Because so many times when you feel opposition, you end up saying something that you shouldn't. And you just get yourself in trouble. But if you pray first, typically that doesn't happen. So, do you pray enough? Do you pray enough? Do you pray for your church? We face opposition every day, just like you do. So we need you to pray for us. All right, so number 1, be prayerful. Number 2, be alert. In verse 9, it says that they prayed and began guarding the city. They were on the lookout for trouble. As followers and servants of Christ, we should always be on the lookout for trouble and evil so that when we encounter it, we can cut it off before it becomes a bigger problem. In the church I came from, not the one I've been describing, in the church I came from most recently, one of the things that was discussed there all the time was that we need church members to act like white blood cells. Now, you know what a white blood cell does? It fights infection. And so when you hear gossip in the hallway or in one of your classes, we need you to fight the infection. When you hear slander, we need you to fight infection. When you hear complaining, we need you to fight infection. We need you to do that stuff. As churches are just like everything else in life. Stuff changes, we keep moving forward, and every once in a while we step on somebody's toes or we do something maybe you don't understand or agree with perfectly. We're not trying to upset anybody. We're not trying to do any of that stuff. We're just trying to follow the will of the Lord and to do those things. And so, but if you hear complaining, if you hear any of that stuff, we need you to be a white blood cell and to get out there and to fight that infection for us. Not ugly. Just neutralize it. Just handle it for us. All right? So, that was to be alert. Number 3, be prepared. In verses 16 through 20, it says that the people were just as prepared for war as they were for work. How prepared are you? Are you prepared mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually to face opposition when you're serving the Lord? Because I can promise you will encounter it when you serve the Lord. Are you putting on the whole armor of God that's talked about in Ephesians 6, verses 13 through 17? And then we have this on the screen. It says, therefore put on every piece of God's armor so you'll be able to resist the enemy in the time of evil. Then after the battle, you will still be standing firm. Stand your ground, putting on the belt of truth and the body armor of God's righteousness. For shoes, put on the peace that comes from the good news so that you will be fully prepared. In addition to all of these, hold up the shield of faith to stop the fiery arrows of the devil. Put on the salvation as your helmet and take the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. So I was thinking about the full armor of God. And most of us, we grew up in church. A lot of us grew up in church, and we've heard this talked about a lot. And you say, put on the armor of God, put on the armor of God, and the breastplate of righteousness, and the shield of faith, and the sword of the Spirit, all this kind of stuff. Armor isn't comfortable to wear. You ever put on armor? Like, it's not comfortable at all. Like, it restricts your movement a lot. Like, it's hard to, it's tight. It's hard to move around and do stuff. And so typically, soldiers, warriors, whatever, like, they only put on armor when they're getting ready to fight. Like, when they're getting ready to do stuff. But that's not what Jesus asks us to do. He expects us to wear our armor all the time. All the time. In and out of season. We have to be prepared in times of peace and in times of war, in times of struggle. We have to be prepared all the time. So are you prepared? All the time. Do you pray like you should? Do you read your Bible like you should? Do you come to church as much as you should? Are you in a small group? Are you being discipled? Are you discipling somebody else? Are you doing those things? Because if not, when the devil and the opposition shows up, you won't be prepared and you'll fall and you'll crumble. All right, next up. Number 4, be united. In verses 19 through 23, it says that the people were spread out and separated along the wall while doing the work. And so it would be easier for these small groups to be overtaken. All along the city, all on the wall, small groups were handling just different sections. And so if all of a sudden Sanballat and Tobiah and the rest of them showed up, it'd be easy for those smaller groups to be overtaken. And so Nehemiah had a plan for that. He sent a trumpeter with each group. And so if they got attacked, they would blow the trumpet, and then everybody would come help. Everybody come help. So even while they were separated, they were still united. Nehemiah still had a plan to take care of everybody. And so the same thing goes for here at Hillcrest. Over the last year, COVID separated everybody. COVID has separated everybody. And not everybody is back yet. And so for those of you who are watching online, we hope that you come back because we'd love to have you here. I'd love to meet you. I never have. But I hope that even through our distance, whether here or at home or wherever people are watching, that we are still united as one, like Nehemiah united the people, that we can still be united. We're united through our service. We're united through our church. We're united through our love for each other and the direction that I believe that we're headed in. And the last one says, be determined. In verses 21 through 22, it says that they never stopped working. From morning till night, they never stopped building. So they never gave up. And that has to be our mindset as well. When God has called us to work, we can't give up. I've seen many a church die because they just stopped trying. They just gave up. And so I don't want that to be us. I want us to keep moving forward. I want us to keep reaching people and reaching the next generation and just doing some awesome stuff here. And then I put this down. Walls and churches won't build themselves. And so we have to be a part of that. All right, so here we go. 3 truths every wall builder needs to know. Sorry. Again. Number 1, you don't have to look for trouble. It'll find you. Number 2, the best defense is a good offense. Number 3, some of you will like this one, provided I can get it out of this. No. Thanks for asking, though. Some things are worth fighting for. So Nehemiah and the people of Jerusalem weren't just fighting for their lives. They were fighting for so much more than that. So much more was at stake. Number one, they were fighting for their faith. In verse 2, it says, Sanballat mocks their sacrifices. He's mocking their worship. He's mocking their faith. He's mocking their God. He's mocking what they believe in. Christians have been mocked for centuries. Young people, it won't stop with your generation. It's just going to keep coming. The mocking is just going to get worse, and you have to be prepared for it. You have to decide if your faith is worth fighting for. Older folks, we have to decide if our faith is worth fighting for. And are you prepared to defend what you believe in? In 1 Peter 3, verse 15, it says that we always have to be prepared to give a reason for the hope we have. Are you prepared to defend your faith? Because if not, you're going to get attacked, you're going to get questioned, and you're just going to stumble and fall. So, they're fighting for their faith, and they're also fighting for their families. In verse 14, it says, Don't be afraid of the enemy. Remember the Lord who is great and glorious, and fight for your brothers, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your homes. Are you willing to fight for your families? And I don't just mean physically. All right, I'm hoping that never comes up. But are you willing to pray for them? Are you willing to pray with them? Our parents, are you willing to set a godly example for your kids? Are you willing to set a godly example for your spouse? Dads, are you willing to lead your families? Our country has a lot of problems. The biggest problem, in my opinion, that our country has is we have a bunch of dads who are slackers. If every family had a dad, it'd fix a lot of stuff. It just would. So dads, are you prepared to lead your families? And I don't just mean, are you willing to die for them? Because most of us will say, right now, if somebody walked in and they want to start shooting people, I'd step in front of my family in a heartbeat. So I feel as though most of the men in here would do that for their families. Dads, let me ask you a question. Are you willing to do the really hard thing? Are you willing to fold some clothes? Are you? Are you willing to wash some dishes? Are you willing to help out around the house? Are you willing to go over your kids' math when you have to learn it again yourself? Which is what I get to do. Are you willing to do those things? What are you willing to do to protect your families? And what are you willing to do to protect the faith of your families? One of the lasting legacies of the Bible is that faith is handed down from generation to generation to generation to generation. Don't let yours be the last one. Okay? So, 3 truths every wall builder needs to know. Number 1, you don't have to look for trouble. It'll find you. Number 2, the best defense is a good offense. And number 3, some things are worth fighting for. I like this sword. I like carrying it around. I need another one and start slinging it around. Some things are worth fighting for. All right, now, there's one more lasting, indelible image from this passage of Scripture. All right, it happens in verse 17. It says that in one hand they carried a weapon, and in the other hand they carried a tool for work. I'm losing stuff, just ignore it. So in one hand, they were prepared to protect their families. They were prepared to defend their families. They were prepared to fight for their families. And in the other hand, they were prepared to work, and they were prepared to serve. And they did both at the same time. So, I'm going to finish my story now. I talked longer than I thought I would. I'm very sorry. That was y'all's fault. Totally your fault. All right, so the church I was working at, things were getting really, really ugly. Like I said, the stuff that was said to me, the stuff that was said to the other pastors was shocking from people that I thought were Christians, people that were much older than I was. I mean, I was 29 years old. And so it was hard. I had no idea at that time that Christians could be so hateful and cruel. I didn't know. I didn't know it could be like that. And so, like I said, I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I was supposed to be a leader in the church. I was supposed to be somebody who had answers and somebody that people could look to, but I felt helpless. Remember when I said they would come by my office and they would just say these horrible, horrible things to me? Instead of fighting and instead of serving, I just hid. I just shut my office door and hid in my office. And so I left it locked all the time. I was at work, I was in there doing stuff, and it was locked all the time. And they just wouldn't even know that I was there. And so they would just walk on by me because I just got tired of listening to it. And so while sitting in my office, I started looking for other jobs. And so I looked for other church jobs. I looked for jobs outside of the ministry. I looked into going back to school. I looked into anything and everything I could to get out of that situation because I was not prepared for it. And I did not have it in me to help the church get out of it. Now, like I said, it just kept getting worse and worse. And so, we only have church conference business meetings here like once a year or whatever it is. Thank the Lord. There, they had them once a month. It was the second Sunday night of every month. And so one month, a motion was put forward to fire the youth pastor. It didn't go through. The next month, a motion was put forward to fire me. Thank goodness it did not go through. The month after that, they tried to fire the senior pastor. It didn't go through because there were enough people that stayed around just to see us off and to make sure that things were going to be okay. And so eventually the youth pastor left. He just walked up and resigned one Sunday. The next month, I walked up and resigned. I had nowhere to go. Just resigned. And a few months later, the senior pastor left. And like I said, that church, when I got there, was about 230 people. At its height, we grew a little tiny bit. I was there 4.5 years, and we grew a little tiny bit. Before COVID hit, every once in a while, I would go online just to see what it was averaging there. They had 40 people. 40 people. They destroyed the church. And I couldn't stop it. And the senior pastor couldn't stop it. And the youth pastor couldn't stop it. Now, during all of this, or towards the end of it, I started talking to another church in North Carolina, over in the western part of the state, a place that when I would mention this town to people who were from North Carolina would go, I don't know where that is. And so, but ultimately, that's where God led me and my family, and they led us to this little town called Wilkesboro, North Carolina. If you've ever been into Lowe's hardware stores, that's where Lowe's started. It was in Wilkesboro, North Carolina. Now, the town is about the size of a Lowe's, but it's just a small little place, good people. And so the Lord led me there and led my family there. The church, give me a second. I swear, the older I get, what is up with that? All right, so I'm not sure what happens. When I was 30, I think you could shoot me and I wouldn't cry or tear up. So the church there, Mount Pleasant Baptist Church, they gave me a chance to heal. And it took a while. Listen, I was broken and I was a mess for about a year and a half. I'd been whipped and I had lots and lots of wounds and it was ugly. But the church there, they were patient with me. And while I was there, I learned how to lead. And while I was there, I learned how to be bold, and I learned how to make a lot of mistakes that hopefully I won't make again. And I learned how to apologize a lot. And it was good. It was good. And so I'm grateful for them. In that time, there were only two of us, only two pastors there on staff. And we went from about 280 to, before COVID, I think we averaged 700 or so on Sunday mornings, another couple hundred people watching online. But because of that, it was just the two of us. I got to do a lot of really cool stuff that I never would have before. And so I got to lead the senior adult ministry because there's nobody else to do it. And so I got to help come up with the church budget and how to implement it. I got to help redesign Vacation Bible School because we weren't reaching enough kids. I got to start a security team. I don't even have a gun. I do have a sword now, so I'm ready to go. And so I am prepared and ready to roll. And so I got to lead big community events that had thousands of people. I got to do all of this really awesome stuff. And so I'm grateful to Mount Pleasant Baptist Church. I know we have, every once in a while somebody from there watches. There's a family here today. They came down to visit. And so I'm grateful for them because it was there that I learned how to lead. And it was there that I learned how to be a pastor. And it was there I learned how to talk to people. And it was there I learned how to apologize and actually mean it. Because if you've ever been apologized to and they didn't mean it, you know it. And so it was there that I learned how to do all of that stuff. And so I'm grateful for them. But the Lord called me and my family here. And so I want you to know that I'm ready to fight for Hillcrest. And I'm ready to defend it, and I'm ready to protect it, but I'm also ready to serve, and I'm ready to work. And this morning, I just want to know who's with me.